iPods kind of suck as portable music players. iPods are not as simple as just loading music on them and going. There's lots of complications that are only going to get worse in the future. Take, for example, this iPod 5th generation. The battery on this is pretty much shot. It only lasts a couple hours on a charge, whereas it would probably last a lot longer when it was new. And as you can see, the battery has expanded to the point where it's created these gray streaks in the screen that you can see when the backlight is on. And something similar has happened to this iPod Nano 3rd generation. There's a few columns of like messed up pixels on the right side of the screen. In the case of the iPod Nano 3rd gen, this is not really repairable. You can repair them, but this is not an easy job. The iPod 5th generation is significantly easier, but it's still not as simple as just swapping out a battery in a laptop, for example. I think it's even more difficult than swapping out a battery in, say, an iPhone, for example. It's not something your average non-tech person is going to want to do. If you haven't done something like this before, most iPod models are pretty much unrepairable. Another thing that sort of holds iPods back is their storage. The iPod Nano 3rd gen here uses flash storage, so it has a whopping 4 gigabytes of storage, which is not a lot at all in this day and age. You can sort of fit, maybe a couple dozen albums compressed on there, but don't expect to be storing hundreds of lossless albums like you would expect buying a modern music player. And in the case of a lot of iPod models, they use spinning hard drives, which are basically just ticking time bombs at this point. It's a miracle that most of them have lasted this long for being such complicated little mechanical devices. But one day they're just going to stop working, and for these iPods to continue functioning, they're going to need replaced, either by another hard drive, which, unlikely for anyone to ever start making these little mechanical hard drives again, or more likely, something like an enthusiast flash mod. But neither of these are something that everyone wants to do. Neither of these are something that a non-enthusiast is going to want to get into. On almost every iPod, barring the most modern ones they made, you're going to be dealing with the 30-pin dock connector, and this was meant to be the replacement to FireWire, but it in itself is a very slow, antiquated, proprietary connector that, unless you own iPods previously, you probably don't have these lying around, and so it's just another inconvenience in order to connect these to your computer, which is a necessity. You do need to sync these with iTunes, which is also a proprietary software. It is cross-platform, thankfully, but it is an annoyance to not be able to drag and drop files, like FLAC files onto it, like most MP3 players. For example, if you want to listen to FLACs on an iPod, you have to convert them with iTunes to ALAC, which is Apple's proprietary lossless format. It's slightly less efficient than FLAC, so either you convert your entire music library to be less efficient, or you convert your FLAC files on the fly to ALAC when you want to transfer them to your iPod. Either way, it's pretty inconvenient. And Apple has supported every single iPod in iTunes to this day. You can still sync an original iPod from 2001 to the latest Mac OS, but there's no telling how long that's going to be the case, or if there's going to be any enthusiast projects to replace it in the future. So you're kind of just relying on Apple at this point. In my opinion, iPods are sort of like old video games. You can go out and buy an old NES, but the 30-pin connector is probably going to be shot at this point. A lot of the cartridges have become collector's items, and many of them are hundreds of dollars for particular games, and that's not always viable when someone just wants to play the darn game. And so that's why I think for most people, something like an emulator is ideal, and only the enthusiasts will bother getting into original hardware. And I think the same applies to iPods. I don't think for everyone that wants just a portable music player, I don't think iPods are the answer the way that many people tout them as. And so yeah, that's my little incoherent rant for today. If I sound like an idiot just rambling on about how my iPods have broken screens and stuff like that, then please let me know in the comments. Otherwise, just have a good day, I guess.